Hello and welcome to the first tasting episode of My Tiny Bottles, the project where I'm exploring my grandmother's legacy of miniature liquor bottles, one tiny bottle at a time. And with me today, I have Casey Miller.
Hello.
Casey is my favorite bartender at my favorite bar, which is The Last Word in Ann Arbor, Michigan, where we are sitting today. Thanks for having us, Casey.
You're welcome.
He is also a two-time finalist for the USBG World Class Bartending Competition by Diageo, and so knows a lot about cocktails and spirits and likes to toy around with history. So he seemed to be a perfect guest for me for this first video. And I asked him, I said, Casey, I'm working on this project, and what bottle would interest you to taste? And he said amaretto, which seemed kind of like a weird choice. But then I found a bottle of amaretto, and I said, okay, Casey, now is the time. So why? Why amaretto?
So initially, I don't think I put too much thought into it, right? Because we were there right at the, we were having a dinner party and you were talking to me about this. And I just kind of threw it out there as a spirit that reminded me of my childhood. And then it wasn't until later where I started to think about all of my experiences with amaretto over the years that I started really like, wow, it's actually kind of gone with me in my journey.
Well, it definitely reminds me of my childhood. Is an interesting place to start.
Yes, as a professional bartender, especially at my place of employment, I am in no way advocating for underage drinking. That said, we live in reality, and I feel like at this point, I'm 36 years old. We're past the statute of limitations for both like the authorities and my parents. So I can say that, when I was living in Japan, I was, 13, 14 years old. My older brother, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate, first time drinking a little bit of alcohol is probably due to the influence of their older siblings.
Absolutely.
He had a bottle of Disaronno, original. I'm just trying to remember which bottle it was, right?
Bottle was?
I think it did actually say amaretto on it because this would have been like 1999.
1999, they definitely, may still have been there.
Yeah, and so he gave me a little bit with on its own, and then he mixed maybe the first cocktail I ever had. Cocktail. It was he called it the maraschino cherry, and it was amaretto and soda water.
Wow.
And that was the first time, right?
Sure.
And then. Fast forward, high school and college. I remember my college roommate had proudly displayed like a bottle of Jack Daniels, right? Very manly, very masculine above his desk. And I had a bottle of Disaronno Amaretto. Very, very on brand. I remember the first cocktails I looked up, the Godfather.
Yes. Right?
Scotch and amaretto.
Which is not a bad cocktail if you don't make it in the classic, equal parts proportion.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend that.
Yeah, no, it's not good.
We definitely weren't using jiggers and exact measurements in college, but I also, because, Scotch was a little bit strong for some of the guests and some of our ages at the time. We also looked up, there's a Godmother.
Yes.
Which is just amaretto and vodka. And so those were the cocktails I was mixing in my dorm room, and then
and now look at us.
Yeah, now we're here, right? So yeah, I mean, my experience with amaretto goes back a long time, and even now to this day, we're putting cocktails on the menu. I have one on the menu right now, which hopefully I'll have a chance to make one for you later.
I hope so.
That's essentially it's a variation on the amaretto sour.
Well, let's taste this bottle. I mean, that's the point. That's why we're here, right? As I said in my intro video, I think alcohol is for sharing. And lots of people collect these mini bottles all over the world, and they are horrified right now that I'm going to crack this open and we're going to drink it. But for me, that's what this is about. Exploring the history, sharing with Casey, sharing with all of you. So I'm all in. So this is a bottle, and the labels are so reflective. They're actually impossible to take pictures of and mostly to read too. So this is a bottle from 1995 to 1998. Based on my exhaustive searching of eBay ads, old ads on eBay for amaretto to figure out when various words appeared on the label. And you can go back and watch last week's video or listen to the podcast or read the blog on mytinybottles.com to learn all about sort of the transition and why it doesn't say amaretto anywhere on the modern bottle.
Yeah, look out, Wondrich. Here comes Tammy Coxon.
But this is the old one, 95 to 98. How old would you have been at the time of this bottle?
I would have been Sorry, how old was that bottle?
95 to 98.
So yeah, I was 9 or 10 years old.
9 or 10 years old.
Yeah.
Okay. So not yet the one you would have been illicitly tasting,
Yes.
thanks to your brother. All right, we did it. We cracked the bottle. All right, I'm going to pour just a little bit.
Okay.
And we also have some of that modern day amaretto. So do we want to, which one do we want to taste first? I think we should taste the old one.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, cheers.
Cheers.
Smells like amaretto. Almondy. It's got that like a marzipan kind of
Definitely.
finish. It
Right.
smells really good. Like it doesn't smell old and dusty.
Yeah, I mean these glasses are designed to focus the aroma,
Yeah.
and it's straight up, you know, bitter almond. Yeah, so the taste just explodes because this is not super high proof, right? We're looking
Right.
at 28% ABV.
This one is 28% as well. No changes there.
It's a little surprising to me is that I'm not getting as much. Okay, so we're gonna go a little sciencey here. So benzaldehyde is the flavor and aroma compound that is typically associated with almond flavor,
Right.
So you'll find that's in marzipan, amarettos, creme de noyeau, like, you know, anything that's you utilize flavor. And it's a natural product, right? That's found in apricot kernels and such and so forth. But it's surprising to me that it's not as present. And I think that has to do with, you know, how old this bottle is.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't tasted this one yet, but this like almost came across as thin to me, right? And then what's really interesting is like it is thinner. You know, when I poured this, it pours really loose, right? As opposed to this one, which like poured syrupy. And the legs on the glass, I feel like, are more persistent. The color is also different. So we weren't sure if that was just when we were guessing about this before. We're like, is that bottle a different color?
Or just the thickness of the glass?
The thickness of the glass, the texture. But no, like this is significantly lighter. And that could just be because it's been sitting around for a while. You know, these were in just shelves, you know, spice racks on my grandmother's wall. So she might have been, you know, they might have been in direct sunlight, which would bleach it. All right, so this is the modern day version. It smells more almondy. Like with this one, I got that marzipan thing I said, which was like the bitter almond. And almost now that I smell it, then I feel like it's got that kind of dusty old thing, like that vintage. Have you tasted many vintage spirits?
Not a ton. I haven't tasted many vintage liqueurs.
Okay. Yeah, they get a little dusty.
I see what you're talking about. Yeah.
Definitely a little bit lighter in texture, lighter in flavor, more, it tastes more alcoholic, right? Like I feel like I get a bit more of the bite than I do from the modern one, where I maybe get a little bit more of that mouth-coating sweetness.
Right. Yeah, it's funny because you don't really, like when you taste spirits.
And if you need to pour more for proper comparison, feel free.
I think I might.
Okay.
When you're tasting spirits, you know, because alcohol is a volatile compound, you get those notes right up your nose, right? And when you're doing liqueurs that are slightly lower proof, right? Like you don't necessarily get that heat, but when you taste it, I mean, there's a discernible heat to it. Like it lets you know you're not just drinking liquid candy. Like there's a little burn there, which I like, and I think it's a little bit more reserved, a little bit more, dare I say, refined on this one.
The older one?
Yeah.
Yeah. I definitely feel like there's a little bit more going on, and I kind of like the fact that it's got a bit more of a bite. You know, I wonder if they've started putting some additive in there to get this thicker texture, right? Is there some glycerin? Is there something going on there, or just a difference in the manufacturing process that's given it that consistency? Because I expected taste changes, but I didn't expect such a dramatic difference. Could be sugar content too. The sugar content
They may have changed it over the years. No, it's absolutely possible. And the color is just so distinct. You know, this one's so much darker.
So much darker. Well, that was cool. So you said you had some amaretto cocktails in mind.
I do, yeah.
How much do you need, and do you want to use that dusty old bottle?
I feel like, you know, I do. I feel like, though, while I always encourage people to use better spirits in cocktails. It's going to result in a better cocktail. I feel like in this scenario, the subtleties would get a little bit lost. So
that's bartender speak for I tested it on the modern stuff. Don't mess up my recipe, Tammy.
You're gonna throw one of my variables off at the 11th hour. But no, I would be happy to. Be happy to mix up a couple cocktails so we can taste this in a modern version of the amaretto.
Right.
sour.
Think a little bit about what we could do if we had it.
Yeah.
All right. Let's do that.
And through the magic of editing, that took no time at all.
And through the magic of Casey, I said, Casey, why don't you make a drink? And you made 3.
Yeah. So the reason
Casey never does anything small. If Casey can do something, he's going to do it as big as possible. All right.
So the reason I did 3 is because the amaretto sour was one of the first cocktails that many of us had, and it was lampooned for good reason, right? I mean, you can tell me your experience with it, but like back in the dark ages of the cocktail movement, if it could be called that, it's just too sweet.
Yeah.
Like really cloying.
Yeah, it probably started as just amaretto and lemon juice, which maybe would have balanced all right. It's still low ABV, but if you had enough lemon in there. But then when you have bars in the 50s, 60s, 70s that are using sour mix, 80s especially. I call the 70s and 80s the dark ages of cocktails. So then you have sour mix instead of lemon juice. So you're adding sugar as well as sour. And yeah.
So much maligned, but at its heart, we tasted the amaretto on its own. It's a nice.
It is.
It has a great flavor to it, and so Jeffrey Morgenthaler is a bartender, really well known, a bit of a, I look up to him a lot. Yeah. He created, he re-envisioned the amaretto sour, but with fresh ingredients, so fresh lemon juice, fresh egg white, and add a little bit of cask-proof bourbon to just rebalance the drink. And that's what this one is right here.
So I teach this in my class when I do my decades class and we talk about the 80s. And I'm like, I'm not going to make you drink an amaretto sour like they drank it back then. I do this one.
And so this one, it kind of changed the game, right? Like it's playful, but it's very drinkable and it's very balanced. A few years later, a gentleman by the name of Masa, he goes by Masa Udushiro, of Katana Kitten in New York City, made a version that has a little bit of a Japanese-American fusion element to it. So it's an homage to this cocktail, but he utilizes umeboshi, which is Japanese salted plum, and makes a shrub out of it, right? And that adds a little bit of acidity, a little umami. Uses Rittenhouse rye instead of the cask-proof bourbon.
Yep.
And it just has, it's a little subtle, but it definitely has those.
Japanese, going to be subtle, right?
100%, yeah.
What's this on top?
So that's yukari, which is a traditional, like a rice seasoning. So it's dried shiso and a little bit of salt. So just a little bit more of and also lemon spritz, right?
Is there salt in the drink too?
No salt in it. Well, somewhat. It's in the shrub.
In the shrub.
It's in the salted shrub. Yeah. Yep. So definitely
that comes through. Yeah, there's a little bit of a savory quality to it.
Definitely.
This the Jeffrey Morgenthaler version of the drink, I think is just fantastic. He talks about the bourbon. He's like, you just need this half ounce of bourbon. It's just to back things up because amaretto is weak. It needs help. Right? It's basically the quote about it. And it's true. And this is a drink I'll give to people who are like, oh, I don't like whiskey. But they taste that and they're like, oh, no, this is just an amaretto sour. Because the whiskey's just doing the heavy lifting. Yeah. So when we put this cocktail, which is one I made after my first trip to Scotland, back in 2019, is actually before I even had this one, right? I was thinking like, man, amaretto and whiskey, like I can see why they might go together. Let me make a cocktail utilizing a really, really smoky single malt scotch combined with amaretto, a little bit of honey, right? Honey and scotch go so well together. Yes, absolutely.
And then just a touch of pimento dram to kind of dry it out a little bit. And this is my take on it, called the Isla Sour. And it was especially funny because, you know, a year after that, 2 years after that, I tried this one for the first time, and I was just like, oh my God, like that's so cool. Like this, you know, this was the progenitor being the amaretto sour of the 70s, and then this is the reimagining, and then you have just multiple twists and variations and tweaks, and everyone has their own distinct style. And I just think it's at its heart, it's a good product, and it's really fun to make cocktails with.
Excellent. Yeah, these are all really great. The Scotch definitely wins here.
Oh yeah?
Yeah. So I mean, this is an amaretto sour. Most it tastes like amaretto. This is like, oh, there's amaretto and some other stuff. This is like, to me, like especially the nose, like
I mean, yeah,
right? It's like, woo, Band-Aids.
Definitely iodine.
Yeah. Right, and that amaretto is definitely being a supporting character.
My thinking was just like, what if someone made a Godfather sour? You know what I mean? Like, and the egg whites.
It's a great drink.
Egg whites, in addition to adding this really nice fluffy texture, you see it in culture, cooking applications all the time, where those egg whites kind of soften those rougher edges, being, in this case, the iodine notes, that really kind of harsh Isla single malt Scotch. Yeah. So, well, thank you for saying so. This is not a paid endorsement, by the way.
No, these are all really good. Thank you so much. All right. Well, these were delicious, but I'm going to ask, can we set them aside for a little while? Because I have one more bottle that I want you to taste.
Really?
Really?
Okay, bonus.
All right. All right, Casey, I actually have a bonus bottle for us today.
Awesome.
So this is one of those bottles. This is Le Grand Amour, which is a liqueur of cognac and almonds. And it is one of those bottles that I could find out very little about. I have kind of a sketchy theory that it's connected to the Tersigny family cognac distillery.
Okay.
But, you know, that's a big reach. So I couldn't find anything out about it. But since we're tasting almond-flavored things, I thought, hey, let's taste another almond-flavored thing, because I'm unlikely to find anyone who knows anything about this bottle. Sure. And so we both have no idea what to expect. We have nothing to compare it to, although I guess we could bust out our amaretto again if we need to, but let's just do it. This cost $1.99 in the late 1980s to early 1990s is sort of the closest time period I've gotten this one to be. All right.
I'm excited.
I'm excited too. All right, so it looks like modern amaretto. We'll save. Looks like modern amaretto. Maybe not quite as thick.
Yeah, maybe a little bit thinner.
Smells a lot like modern amaretto, a little bit. Not as almondy. It's there.
There's another note in there.
It's the cognac, right? Because Disaronno is made with like a neutral spirit base, and this is made with a cognac base. What do you got?
Yeah, so definitely less marzipan and more like cooked fruit, right? Like that's definitely the cognac talking. Yeah. The almond is there, but it's decidedly like, man, have you ever like, you know, like almonds, right? Like they're basically like stone fruit. They're very similar to like apricots and cherries and all that stuff. But have you ever actually smelled the fruit of an almond? It doesn't have much to it. Oh, yeah. But there's definitely like more, it's fruit and not nut. Right.
Okay. Yeah.
That's kind of what I'm at. But I guess the closest thing would be like a normal person would just be like apricots. Like actual apricot fruit.
Sure. No, that makes sense. All right. No, that's good. I like that.
So I love cognac.
Doesn't taste much like cognac. Do you think it? No, on the finish. All right.
I don't think it tastes much like amaretto. I mean, like maybe in
which it's not. Right. It's a liqueur of cognac and almonds. So it's like, you know what this reminds? You know, it's so to produce amaretto for the most part, right? You basically take the kernels of apricots, and then you macerate it in high proof, neutral grain spirit. This and it's probably not in any way, but this is kind of what I'm imagining. It's evocative of is like they just don't take the fruit off the pits. They just throw the whole fruit thing in there, right? They're not even like shelled or anything.
Yeah, they
Fair.
just pulverize it and then throw it into a bunch of booze and then mix it with cognac and sugar.
Yeah, I
Like,
mean, well,
that's-
I've always assumed that they are just like, I know nothing, right? Liqueur of cognac and almonds. So I was like, okay, maybe they're just soaking some almonds in, right? Like that's what the supposed origin story for Disaronno is, that this widow innkeeper, had a liqueur that she had soaked almonds in, right? And so that's what I kind of assumed they were just doing an infusion and not necessarily a distillate of the almonds themselves, but I have no idea.
Yeah, this is fun. Just off the cuff, no knowledge, no research, just like, what do you taste? What do you know?
Yeah, it's it kind of like reminds me a little bit of like fruitcake,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because you're right, it's got a lot of fruity notes. The cognac is there, but I think for me, it's like mediated so much by the sweetness of it.
Yeah.
I mean, this is sweet. This is
Yeah.
quite sweet. That I like don't pick it up as cognac, I guess. Well, thanks, Casey. This was great.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that you were willing to sit down and talk with me about this today. This is my first tasting video, so this definitely gives me some practice, which I appreciate having such a receptive audience for that.
Happy to.
If you want to learn more about the project, please check out my website, which is mytinybottles.com, and you can find videos like this one, but also the podcast version of this story and written blog posts about all of the bottles individually, and also, of course, those reveal episodes where I pull random bottles out of a bin and tell you what I can guess about them with just a glance, and sometimes I'm wrong, and that's fun too. So yeah, all that's at mytinybottles.com, and thanks, Casey, for coming out.
Cheers.
Cheers.